The spring 2022 anime season is coming to a close, and with that, it is time for me to come here and establish what are my top 5 best shows are of the spring 2022 anime season. As per usual, any show that are continuing on into the summer 2022 anime season are not eligible to be in this list, so yes, as much as I really love summertime rendering, that will be something that will be probably at the top of my list in the next season. Additionally, shows like Awashi, Onipan, those are shows that are going to be continuing on and thus will not be in this list. These are only shows that have completed their current runtime in this season. Additionally, as per usual, I would really love to hear from you guys. What are your top picks for the season? Let me know that in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you guys. So with all that said, let's jump into my top 5 shows of the spring 2022 anime season. As per usual, number 5 was the most difficult because that's always the drop-off point for all the other shows that you really want to have in your list, but I think in the end, I ultimately came to the decision of Yaboi Kong. This is honestly a show that I didn't have like huge expectations for. I figured it would be a fish out of water story with a cute waifu character, but what I got was something so much more, and a show that in the wake of a couple shows this season having these kind of rough endings, this one had an impactful ending. This one really delivered that impactful ending that it was really kind of building up to. It essentially follows a guy that's from the Three Kingdoms warring period, Komei, who gets transported to modern times Tokyo and then becomes the tactician, not really manager, a tactician of an up-and-coming singer. This girl that really wants to become really popular and sing her music for people. And obviously the joke behind this is having this Komei guy using all these tactics from his previous life to really benefit Eiko as she performed. But it came into so much more than that, as it included characters like Kabe, who was a rapper, and bringing him into the mix, and really kind of taking these characters and driving them to their success. But again, ultimately running into this pinnacle point at the very end of the show where everything kind of comes together really phenomenally. I love the ending so much for this show. It looked great. The music was fantastic. And the surprising thing is I absolutely fell in love with Komei as a character. He wasn't a fish out of water. He was really just a different perspective in this world. He doesn't constantly going, oh, what's a smartphone? He's always kind of giving things from a different vantage point that we don't necessarily see in these modern times. And I really did love that chemistry that was added to the show. It's just a great show overall. I really enjoyed it, and like I said, the ending nailed it. Moving on to my number 4, I have Spy X Family, or Spy Family if you want to critique that. Part 1. Now, I think the only reason this is so far down on my list is because I felt like the last episode for this particular core was kind of a shrug. I mean, I really was hoping that we would have some sort of climax to kind of end cap this, but obviously the show is continuing on into October, so I'm looking forward to that return because, honestly, every episode of the show, there's maybe one episode that was kind of that was all right. But for the most part, there's so many really fantastic moments throughout this entire part 1 of the season. I think Lloyd is a fantastic character that we're slowly seeing these kind of changes to. Anya's absolutely adorable, and yes, Yor is just waifu material through and through. It's just a really great chemistry they produce with these 3 characters. One, the secret spy, one, the assassin, and yes, the daughter who can read minds. And us, obviously, Anya being very young and not really utilizing that mind reading to some sort of benefit because she's kind of juvenile. But it creates so many fun moments between these characters. The action's great, the animation's fantastic, it's Cloverworks and Wit Studio working together, so it looks absolutely phenomenal. And I just love the shenanigans that these characters have gotten through so far. And like I said, it has me looking forward to part 2 in October. Moving on to my number 3, I have The Executioner and Her Way of Life. This show just totally caught me off guard. Now, granted, I had some expectations coming into it, and this idea that it's supposed to be about this assassin that kills isekais, which is kind of a different take on your typical isekai. That aspect right there was what initially drew me in, but I was completely shocked by how much I loved diving into the show every single episode. It was one of those shows that surprised me in how much every single episode that I ended, I had so many things to think about. So many theories that I was running with what they were doing with the characters. Again, it follows a character who is an assassin in this fantasy world that their job is to go find people that have been isekai'd from our world and take them out because they're a threat to the world itself. I loved how it was digging into the gray area of this idea that these innocent people are brought over against their will, but they have power that can destroy the world, so these assassins essentially have to kill them. They don't like that they have to, but they have to. Otherwise, they could end this entire world. And then getting into Akari, who is one of these brought over, who has the ability to control time, getting into the past and these human errors from the past, these destructions that were caused by these other worlders brought over. All that stuff was super fascinating, and I loved every single episode of this series. Now, the only reason it's, even though I love it so much, the only reason it's down in my number 3 is because I felt like the ending was a little bit too much of a bait. Like, it showed so much stuff that is not going to be covered, because I don't know if we'll get a second season of this, but I still love the journey, and I love the character so much. Momo is an awesome yandere character. Ashina is a fantastic female lead character, very, very strong, very almost kind of prince-like. And then you have Minot, who I love her character design, and she kicks total butt. It's a great cast of characters. I love it so much. I highly recommend checking it out. Moving on to my number 2, I have Kaguya-sama Love is War Ultra Romantic. Yes, I'm not going to go past this entire list without having Kaguya-sama. This show continues to be a broken record for me because I keep having to talk about it because it keeps coming out and I keep loving it. But it's just absolute writing perfection, absolute directing perfection. Like, everything about this show and how they produce this is perfection. It's something to be said about a show that continuously has mundane little conversations that somehow are managed to be blown out of proportion just based on how it's visually representative, how the narration plays it out, how the music kicks in for it. Everything plays out these very overblown, over-the-top situations that are so simple. To give a really great examples, you have this whole situation where Kaguya finally gets a phone, and she gets online, so she's got a messaging system, and she doesn't know about the whole red receipt system. So she thinks that she can just wait to reply to somebody, but we know from our end that she's already given that receipt for reading it. And it just turns into this whole dramatic scene, and how it plays out is so hilarious because it's so dramatic. And it continues to do that every single episode, no matter how many seasons of this show that comes out. And yes, technically at the end of this season, we got a huge payoff for kind of what we've been waiting for a long time. Not specifically maybe what we were looking for, but it's still a payoff that we've all been kind of craving for a long time. And I think that gave it a nice, satisfying end to this particular season. And of course, there will be more. And I will be back here in that season or that movie letting you guys know how fantastic it is. But fantastic characters, great writing, and like I said, phenomenal directing. The studio A1 Pictures is just knocking it out of the park every season. And for my number 1, and my continued broken record, but I will continue as long as this keeps getting seasons, and I will love every minute of it. My number 1 is Ascendance of Bookworms Season 3. I absolutely adore this show to death. Mine continues to be one of my favorite characters of all time, and the story that we got into with this season was super engaging, and I really could not get enough. It sucks that it only had 10 episodes, and within that 10 episodes, I got so much content that I keep eating it up, and I just want more. Technically, with this season really kind of throwing mine into a situation that I've kind of expected for some time. For those unfamiliar that obviously have not been watching me long enough, this follows a girl who is a bookworm from our times that gets transported into the body of a girl named Mine in this other world. And she's in the commoner section. She has like a lot of illness about her. She's very frail. She gets sick a lot. Eventually, we learn what's causing that sickness. It eventually leads her to having to go to the church at this place, and eventually getting involved with the nobles of this particular world. And the thing that we get for this season is a lot of focus on all this stuff that she's doing that's creating attention and creating questions for certain groups of people that ultimately bring threat upon her and her family. And that's sadly where I get to my conclusions with this particular season, and what I kind of fell in love with even more with this series is this idea that Mine is always kind of thrown into really terrible situations. And she's kind of a product of consistent tragedies. Like, she's constantly thrown in tragedy, but yet she's always like this positive nature, and she's always looking out for other people, even though she's kind of selfish. And the other thing that this season especially highlighted for me for this series and this writer is how well these side characters are wrote, and the idea that they're not characters that are there just to serve Mine's needs. They're not there to be puppets to Mine's happiness. Every character is a living, breathing character that has their own desires and selfishness. Even characters like Ferdinand, who we've grown to love throughout these entire 3 seasons, we finally get a perspective that really, in the end, if Mine steps out of line, if Mine becomes a threat, he himself will be willing to end her. And yes, he himself has his own desires for the domain itself. And if he can, he will do anything that he can and use anything that he can to get his own desires met. The characters are phenomenal. I love the world it's in, and every single episode I'm craving more. And I cannot wait, and I hope that we get a 4th season of this show. This is easily one of my favorite shows of all time. probably easily my second favorite isekai of all time. It's hard to recommend it saying that it's an isekai because I think that's kind of a disservice to the show. It's really not. It's not an isekai. It's something so much more, and I highly recommend people checking it out. It's one of the few shows that no matter how many times I recommend it and people come back, they always say thank you for suggesting this show, and I think that's a really high praise for this series. That's it. That's my top 5 shows of spring 2022. Again, like I said before, please go down in the comments down below. Let me know what your picks are. For my honorable mentions, I have quite a few because there's a lot of good shows this season. Demon Girl Next Door, I still absolutely love this show. Shamiko is just, this is pretty much my sugar show of the season. I mean, there's another one that I'll mention later on, but just every single time I turn on the show, I smile. Shamiko is just a bundle of fun. I love Momo. I love all the characters of the show, and just Shamiko. Like, just give me more Shamiko, and I'm happy. Dawn of the Witch turned out to be very surprising to me. Now, it had a lulling point somewhere in there, but I think for people that are like me that really did like certain aspects of Grimoire of Zero, getting a technical sequel of the series as Dawn of the Witch has been a huge joy. I love a lot of the characters in the show, minus the main character. I think he's the big drag down of the entire series, but I just love getting more into the lore of this world, which is something that I was drawn to with the original series, even though I didn't really like the direction it went to in the later sections of it. But I really do enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to hopefully maybe a second season. Trapped in the Dating Sim, Life is Tough for Mobs was a huge surprise for me, and I think really all that really is in that I really like the main character. He's a jerk. He does the things that you want the main character to do in certain situations. He's still a jerk. And it also does some really interesting things around the idea of manipulating an otome game, basically. This idea that this one female character comes in and swoons over the male princes of this particular academy. And really kind of twisting it, taking the antagonist character and showing that she's got reasons for why she's kind of mad. Getting to what happens to the main female character when you rip the role from her. All these things that are kind of getting into the psyche of what happens when you really kind of scramble up this game made into a world. I'm quitting heroing. This was so going to end up on my top 5 list. It's just that ending. And again, a lot of people have said that they disagree with me, so that's perfectly fine. I just felt like the ending for this series kind of put a huge nasty taste in my mouth. I felt like the other 11 episodes of this show is phenomenal. I highly recommend, and I still highly recommend this entire series. I'm Quitting Heroing is a great look into the mind of somebody that is a hero that has really had his life turned upside down because he's no longer able to be the hero, and just digging more and more into that. It's not the sum of what you see at the beginning. It's kind of one of those shows where you have to wait until you get in there about 4 episodes before you realize, wait, what are they doing with this character? It does a setup. It sets up the characters. It shows you the characters. It gets you used to everybody, and then suddenly goes, oh, by the way, the main character, flip. And you're like, whoa, wait, what are we doing here? What are we doing with this character? And I still love it for that. Like I said, I feel like that ending, it's one of those things where, as much as I love those 11 episodes, I feel like a good section of that one is kind of discredited by how they just kind of go shrug at the end. And I don't like that. It really did kind of, it made me believe that I was kind of fooled into thinking there was something more important there. But anyways, that aside, next one, Daimon. Daimon is just a super wholesome show. Now, I feel like a couple stories in there were kind of a little bit, I didn't feel anything there, but for the most part, it's a very laid-back show, so don't expect too much out of this show. But it's not really going for high drama. It's going for, again, very wholesome storytelling about characters that just have these issues that they're facing, but it always kind of tries to have an ending to it that just kind of warms your heart. It's a very soothing show. It's a very relaxing and healing type of show that I really did enjoy, and the main character is an absolute goofball. Itsuka's absolutely adorable, and she must be protected. It's just a really solid show overall. And for my last honorable mention, I will give it to Aharen-san is Indecipherable. This series was super cute. I loved it to death. Having a Aharen who is just absolutely adorable, and this guy who just goes out of his way and goes above and beyond to try to really communicate to her. It was super cute. The two of them together are just so adorable. And I love that we actually got a really good payoff at the end. It felt like a very satisfying ending that really did warm my heart. They're absolute goofballs. I love the shenanigans they got into, and basically in the fact of miscommunications between the two of them, because Aharen doesn't really speak up very well, and Raido is just kind of overblows things, and he's a goofball. His imagination runs wild, but Anyways, that's all I'm going to mention. There's tons more. It's a really fantastic season. I absolutely loved it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video as always. Again, if you did, make sure to hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. I do news coverage, first impressions, top lists. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Additionally, if you want to support us more, we have a Patreon link, a tips link, and a super thanks button down below. I definitely appreciate everybody that supports us. It means a lot to me. And y'all take care.